Good afternoon to all, and before we begin, just wanted to say that for us it's a great pleasure to be among this very group of distinguished musicians. Our presentation today is about the historical background, structural characterization, and repertoire constitution with the creation of the Sixxen by Iannis Xenakis. My name is Fabio Oliveira. I'm professor of percussion at the University of Goiás in central Brazil, and Ronan Gil, professor of percussion at the Federal Institute of Technology in Goiás. And the article was written with two other colleagues who are not present here, Fernando and José Luis. They also teach at the Federal Institute of Technology in Goiás. Well, the Sixxen project, as we call it, by our percussion sextet Impaco, really came about based on the performance, or trying to build a performance of the piece of Pléiades, and that meant researching and looking for practical, dealing with practical issues about constructing the instrument, and also looking at what had been done with the instrument, as well as thinking about commissions of new works. We were, though, from the very beginning interested in trying to leave a trail and to perhaps keep a systematic record of what we see is available in terms of information on the instrument. And so this article is only presents a small portion of a project that began in late 2013 when we asked the National Council of Technological and Scientific Development for money to actually build the instruments. And we were granted $46,000, and then we had additional funding from the Federal Institute, mainly to deal with the frame and the pedal for the instruments. So, introduction, of course, Pléiades is the second collaboration that Xenakis had with Percussion de Strasbourg. On their website, Strasbourg writes, Iannis Xenakis, born in 22, wrote Pléiades during the years 1978 to 1979 on a commission from the city of Strasbourg. This work was performed for the first time by Les Percussions at a concert with the Ballet du Rhin, 3rd May of 1979. The Pléiades title refers to the 6 members of the Percussions. Well, the North American premiere and US premiere was given by the Overland Percussion Group, directed by Michael Rosen with Xenakis in the audience, and the Canadian premiere was given by Nexus in Toronto in the early 80s, also with the composer in attendance. Well, as you know, I'm sure everyone knows, but the piece is divided into 4 movements, delineated by 3 basic instrumental timbres: drums, keyboards, and an instrument that at the time was a newly invented metal instrument called the Sixxen, in reference to the performers of Les Percussions, of course, and Xen in reference to the composer's first name. And so for a performance of the complete piece, one necessarily has to deal with the issue of building the instrument or securing the instruments. And as was with our case, we were building the instrument. And now it's been almost 35, 36 years since the premiere. And there are a few academic sources that we can find. So Lacroix, and you have the references in your hands. These 4, basically Harley, Marandola, and Xenakis himself, deal with aspects of an analytical approaches to the music. And Brett Reed in 2003 deals basically with how one goes about constructing the instruments themselves. Yeah, of course, you find another host of information, but the sources are pretty much scattered, and it's hard to find one place where you can find more information. So we've been talking about the Sixxen a bit, or implying about the instrument, but really, what is the Sixxen? Xenakis helps. So in the foreword to the score, this is how Xenakis instructs. The second essay was to have a new metallic instrument built called the Sixxen, comprising 19 irregularly distributed pitches with steps of quarter tones or thirds of tones or their multiples. In addition, the 6 copies of the instruments taken as a whole should never produce unisons. After a long trial, I constructed a series scale which, unlike these traditional scales, is not based on the octave. It possesses internal symmetries and manages to cover the total chromatic space in 3 consecutive copies, periods, thus enabling it to create by itself, without any transpositions, supplementary harmonic fields when polyphonic superpositions are made. So this is from the score again, and we can see that it's more of a concept of the instrument, but it's vague and ambiguous, and there's no actual direction as to how what the instrument should look like. More general guidelines. A little later, and this is cited in Robin Engelman's page. This is also Xenakis is speaking about the instrument, but it's a little later time than the score. And Xenakis says, quote, "But the Sixxen is not yet fully satisfactory. It would be desirable to construct a new one. This new instrument should be made of brass and steel. It should be 19 metal pieces, should be tuned to produce 19 pitches, but which should absolutely not form an equally tempered scale. He says the whole range of the 19 pitches is arbitrary, and then however, this range should be nearly the same for all the 6 percussionists and placed within the same extremes of pitch. Furthermore, they must not form unisons. The deviation could be slight, but should still be noticeable." Well, of course, then from those definitions by Xenakis, some interesting questions arise. Of course, there's no directions as to what the choice of metal to be used, the timbre and the pitch of each bar, the resulting tessitura, the size of the bars, the frames, the arrangement of notes, and et cetera, et cetera. Composer Philippe Manoury in 2012 speaks of the inharmonious nature of the sound of the Sixxen because the metal chosen takes away the sensation of the fundamental pitch. Philippe also talks about the notational convenience. These instruments, he says that for notational convenience, these instruments are arranged as keyboards. So from F3 to B4, but then of course, the played bars do not correspond to these notes. And then the Jean-Paul Bernard recalls receiving the first score of the piece written on 19 lines, and the instruments set up right each bar after the other. And quickly after the first rehearsal, they said, "Well, this is not gonna work. One cannot read those 19 lines." But so an interesting question comes, well, if it's disposed usually like a keyboard, and if it's written on F3 to B4, can it be considered a keyboard instrument? And then, well, Philippe doesn't really write about his answer, but he writes for 2 movements for Sixxen in his book of keyboards. We also have many instances where people talk about the instrument as if it were a keyboard. So Stilitano, you have all this cited in the article. He says that the Sixxen are shared between 6 keyboards. Wanderer says that they're a type of metal vibraphone. Lesney says that the Sixxen are similar in appearance to a marimba. The Ensemble Clocks in Motion on their website says that the Sixxen are made up of metal keyboards. And so this is a general idea. We counter that sort of way of thinking with there's nowhere is in the score is there indication that these should actually be keyboards. Xenakis certainly doesn't treat them as that, and also the fact that the first score and the first disposition of the instruments were 19 lines, that says something to us about them not being keyboards, though most of the times we do talk about the instrument as if they were keyboards. Another interesting question, can we think, is it a set of Sixxen, or is it a unit of Sixxen? In other words, when you play one instrument of the set of 6, Would that make it a one gin rather than a Sixxen? And Xenakis refers to both aspects in the score, yet his description favors a view of Sixxen as an inseparable and interdependent set consisting of 6 intricate and related units, each being played by a different musician, with 6 non-exact pitch copies. It is the confluence and simultaneous performance on these 6 units that gives meaning to all of them. That turns them into a pleiad, the cluster of traveling stars, in reference to the title. And this subtle difference in concept of a unit and a set may modify the analytical perspective of later repertoire and show the change from Xenakis' original concept that occurred when other composers began to write for the Sixxen solo, or even for chamber music using only a unit or 3 units or any part of the original set of 6.
So now we will talk about some historical considerations with a focus on the relationships between Xenakis and Les Percussions de Strasbourg. So we are using some considerations of Jean Bachin, one of the founders of the Les Percussions de Strasbourg, and we worked to Persephasa's creation and to Pleiad creation too. And he said, rencontrer Xenakis, c'est quelque chose de très important, c'est aller vers l'histoire. So he's saying to reach Xenakis is really important, and it's a way through the history, to the percussion history, and to the history of music too. So he said to situer Xenakis, comme je l'ai dit en commençant, c'est le rencontrer. Et pour rencontrer quelqu'un, il faut faire la moitié du chemin, alors que l'autre personne en parcourt l'autre moitié. De 69 à 79, c'est ce qui s'est passé entre Xenakis et le groupe. Lors de la création de Pleiad, j'ai pensé avec mes amis que le chemin de la rencontre était fait. Si l'attitude de Xenakis à la première répétition de Pleiad a été la même qu'à Persépolis pour Persephassa, nous avons su comprendre et calmer notre propre inquiétude. En vérité, ce qui se passe chez cet homme, dans de telles circonstances, c'est qu'il découvre tout à coup le concret de son œuvre. Alors qu'il ne consulte personne pour imaginer sa musique, il vient écouter ce que cela donne. So, Jean-Baptiste he's saying about these relationships with Xenakis, and Jean-Paul Bernard will bring us with more information about the first prototype, the prototype accepted by Xenakis. So, to resume it, he said, to my knowledge, I know the existence of 2 versions of Sixxen in this period. The first, it was made by Kohlberg, a German company, and it was a prototype without pedal. And the second one was this accepted by Xenakis and is the current one. So Les Percussions de Strasbourg uses the second prototype, and it's an instrument built by Robert Ebrard. So he said too about this prototype. The problem with this Sixxen is that it does not respect the tuning imagined by Xenakis. On the other hand, I know Iannis loved this instrument because it was rich in harmonics and partials. So we have a great information here, because Xenakis thinking in a sound, but he accepted another instrument and another tuning aspects of this instrument. And another thing pretty interesting in this Jean-Paul Bernard speech is Xenakis worked with Yamaha to build a instrument for sale, but as he say, unfortunately, despite several of Iannis' trips to Japan, in presenting the new Sixxen built by Yamaha, Xenakis still wanted to make changes, and the project was abandoned with Yamaha. So maybe it's better to do not have a formalized instrument accepted, because all we can see as instruments shows a great diversity of instruments and sounds and possibilities. So Jean-Paul Bernard says too, I always had the impression that even if it's a work that has been played for many years, each time it was played, Xenakis rediscovered it, in part because of the prototype instrument. As he said in French, j'ai toujours l'impression que même si l'œuvre a été jouée plusieurs fois, j'ai toujours eu l'impression que Xenakis redécouvrait pas seulement l'œuvre, mais aussi les possibilités de l'instrument, et je crois que c'est justement à partir de ce type d'instrument qui est prototypique. So, our work focused on the many Sixxen prototypes in world, and we to do that we do a great review. So with different sources using periodicals, websites, recordings, concert programs, and concert reviews. So we can see the results, and you have the paper in your hands. We have a total of 43 ensembles have performed Sixxen in 18 countries. And it was organized, all the data in a table. The table 1, we can see the name of the ensemble, the country where they're from, the constitutive material of the bars. So you can ask, but it's metal, the constitutive material. Yes, but we have many kinds of material used. So to the bar profile, we have essentially 4 types of bar profiles, and we have in some prototypes the presence of damper pedal and the presence of resonators. To the 4 types of bar profiles, so we have technically the channel, or we can say to the inverted U, and we have inverted U with equal sides, and we have inverted U with unequal sides. We find some prototypes with profile like a square tub and flat bar. So here we can see an example of the table 1. So for example, if we see bell percussion, it's an instrument from England. It's a percussion company. They are selling prototype, a Sixxen prototype. So the constitutive material used is the aluminum, and they are doing with inverted U with unequal sides. There's no damper pedal, and there's no resonator to this prototype. So some instruments may be repeated because of a shared use by different groups. So, for example, here we can see Conservatoire de Saint-Cloud with Eve Payer as the teacher in this institution, and the informations are here, and it's maybe the same instrument of Bergerot. We think they both, the Bergerot company, the French company, they bought a Sixxen from them. So now we will see some prototypes.
Tem que ir pouco tempo, então.
And here's the prototype accepted by Xenakis. We can see in this photo the large size of the bars. It's a really big instrument, and we see the difference of colors between the diatonic and the pentatonic scale. This prototype has a pedal, but a damper pedal, but hasn't resonators. Here we can see more details, so it's an inverted U profile, bar profile. And here's the Bergerot company prototype. So we can see a pedal tool, resonators, and the bars like aluminum inverted U. Here's the Bell company, and it's a picture from their website. We cannot see pedal, we cannot see resonators, but we can see the same bar profile. So aluminum inverted U. More details of the same instrument. And here the soul percussion Sixxen is a square tube in aluminum. Square tube in aluminum, without pedal and without resonators. Here a pretty interesting prototype. It's from Synergy, from Australia. There are three kinds of bar profiles. So they are using to the low pitches aluminum in U inverted, and to the middle they are using inverted U in the steel material, and to the high pitches they are using a flat bar, a steel flat bar. But we can see here, if we can spell it like A, B, C, we have three kinds of units. We have this unit, it's A and B. We have this unit, it's A and C. And we have this unit, it's A, B, C. So we have three groups of two kinds of materials.
So within the set, the instruments are not the same from each other. They're all built with a different type of construction.
Type of construction and type of bar profile. So this is the last one we want to show today. It's the Kuniko Kato Sixxen. So there are square tubes. Here we have more details. There are stainless steel square tubs, and she's using hammer to plate. And different of the others instrument, you have not the difference between the F and the F sharp and the G and the G sharp. No, she's doing just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a sequence. So sorry, we can see here we haven't the tree. It's continuous. It's always continuous. To our work, we tested many materials with many kinds of metals, with our choice basically centered in an L-shaped cross section in stainless steel and damping pedal.
So one of the props of having the money is that we could really go and buy all these types on the left. We bought large pieces of metal and we had them cut, and then we heard them, and we actually came to the very unusual choice, which was the L-shaped format of instruments on the right.
You can imagine with this profile we have a great defy to put it together. So we are in a final etap to construct this instrument, so we can see some photos here. And about the repertoire for Sixxen, we have basically two considerations to do. It's clear all the groups constructed Sixxen to play Pléiades, and after they are working with composers to new pieces, and it's the example of Les Percussions de Strasbourg. So we can see the first etap where we can see just Sixxen as a sextet of percussion, and in 2004, Daniel Weymouth composed a piece for Sixxen and oboe. And after that, we can see a great diversity of orchestration, of possibilities to Sixxen. So Brian Fernahel, his opera Shadow Time exists just one unit of Sixxen. We can see here, for example, Luis Tinoco, Portuguese composer. He's just to Steel Factory. He's just writing for 3 pitches. So he don't use 1 unit or 2. He just wants 3 pitches of Sixxen. And we can see in the repertoire Sixxen and live electronic and many others possibility with video, with interaction with live electronics too.
So to wrap up, a few final considerations that there is a great deal of diversity of the prototypes we can find around the world, and that shows the importance the piece has taken within our community. The instrument's history is very recent and absolutely not complete. Just before the presentation, we learned of a performance that's going to go on in Atlanta in a couple of weeks from now. So the 43 instances that we found are actually 44, and we are sure that there are many more that we couldn't actually find. And so in that case, certainly many more prototypes will be computed and other types of issues will come up. The research will continue, of course. It's an ongoing project until we will have the prototypes done by the end of the month. We've actually spent most of the money to buy the bars. Now we still have money to build the frames and do any tweaks we want. We have extra sets of profiles that we can actually build a whole different set with the money we have. But it's really a sort of community project, and we would like to invite everyone who has information. We were talking to everyone we meet around and ask them about the instrument. And so right now, information is in the article, but we have a much bigger database, and that's going to go on to temporarily onto honanju.com. and under Sixxen project, and it's supposed to be a repository for information regarding performances and for the construction of the instrument. So this is our presentation. We would like to thank you all, and if there's time for questions, maybe Ayun can tell us if we have time for questions. Yeah, Chris.
I would like just to apologize my English, but if I speak French, maybe it will be less accessible. So thank you for, and I apologize that.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, how about the tuning? So he calls for a pretty precise use of intervals.
No, the tuning. I think a misconception from we can see his description is that they have to be in either quarters of tones or thirds of tones. And usually when people describe it, it's just common to say, oh, the instruments are put up in quarters of tones. And then Philippe Manoury says, well, if they need to be quarter tones from each other, the smallest increment from one bar to the other would be a minor third. So you'd have a C, a sharp C, a D, a sharp D, and then I missed one here, but in the chromatic. And so that since the instruments cannot sound the same, before you get to the next one of the 19 bars, you would actually have a minor third. That also is a misconception, which assumes that the incremental difference that Xenakis doesn't want the unisons. Philippe is assuming that the smallest increment would be a quarter of a tone. So I guess there's this information, but really there's a lot of the ways in which people talk about the instrument in general, but the tuning particularly are I think more misguiding than helpful in some ways. Yeah.
It sounded like you have a lot more leeway design.
Absolutely. And I guess that comes to another point, is that I guess what we're really getting to is that Xenakis, he seems to be unhappy with every single version of the instrument built. So he was continually unhappy with the Strasbourg, but happy, and then he wasn't satisfied. We talked to Russell, and he wasn't really satisfied with Nexus, and he wasn't really satisfied with anything he heard. And really, maybe at one point, the Yamaha experience is telling, because he was trying, he went several trips to Japan, and let's make this thing. And then maybe at one point he said, well, it's probably not a great idea to have something standard, because as Russell was saying this morning, it's the instrument exists much more as a concept, as a continual ideal of research and searching for new sounds, much rather than one specific prototype. So we're actually happy that they're not a mini standard.
And we can think in the Xenakis profile. So he was architect. He was always projecting the future. When we can see some imaginary projects of him, we can see the future, the city of future. So he was designing a concept of a city to 300,000 people in one building. So, but he was a person extremely linked with the past, with the Greek poetry, the classic poetry, and he's this person who is looking to the past and looking to the future and in the present time. So this concept of Sixxen, it's maybe something who will always abarcar, englobar. It's a concept who will include all the prototypes, build it just, and the futures and the other possibilities. Maybe if we can think in another geography to the Sixxen, it will be a Sixxen. Yeah. If we respect the concept, and if we are trying to do that, we are building a Sixxen.
Yeah, so Honan brought up last night after the performance that there's nothing from the bell plates that were used last night in the Music in Bach performance. There's nothing that says that in the context of a group of six being played, that they could not be a Sixxen. They really could be. They fit the general description that Xenakis gives, But really, and then the other point is that we really think that they really should function as a unit, or at least that was the original intent that Xenakis had behind them, Sixxen rather than one Zen.
Just wondering if Xenakis say anything about the damper pedals. That's my memory. I don't remember that there were any damper.
No. He never. But he never wrote about it. But the first prototype from Les Percussions Strasbourg. When Robert Ebrard built this prototype, this prototype has a pedal, so he accepted. But you are right; he never wrote about it.
Neither about pedals or also about the
or
tubes,
resonators,
yeah.
Or.
No, he does say that they should be, and the description I read, he says that they should not be too resounding, but it's vague. Yeah, Steve.
I just wonder, do you have enough to tell us briefly why you prefer the L shape?
Yeah, we had a recording, but it's very rudimentary, and so we thought we wouldn't show it. But it's just we get the money from the agency. We do all this justification. We had to do a process to justify getting the money, and then at the end, we try to do that. So we tested vibraphone bars and keyboard bars and everything. We record and put like sound parameters and analysis, and then at the end it was just we're like, what sounds best, and we just hit the thing, and we tried everything. At the end we're like, is this better than
many materials are pretty interesting, but in the end of all this research, it's an individual choice. It's a kind of artistic feeling. It's a choice.
It's very hard. It's very rewarding too.
But it's really interesting to think in the Sixxen as this whole kind of sounds possible, and many others future sounds possible. We will search, and others groups will find too. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much.